Hey, there he is. You're on mute, Lance.
Over here. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, the email took a while to come through. I just found it.
Oh, strange.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, well, we're all here now.
Yeah.
All right, Lance, before we get started, specifically, so you bought the language school in a box to create your own ESL program, right?
No.
So you're not going to work for me.
Nope.
You're starting your own school, so to speak, right?
That's it.
Now you're going to use my program, which I've been using since 2011, and it works. It works really well. We saw evidence of that yesterday during the class with Claudia, right? So
yeah, I did. It's really impressive. And she's only been with you for what you said, 3 months?
Since December. So we're going on 4 months now.
Right.
She had a little, I can send you the link to her very first class that I had with her. She didn't start from the first lesson. She started from lesson number 4 or 5 of my very first level.
All right.
And she's a great use case, so to speak, of who I work with, right? So like almost every student that I've ever worked with here in Denver, nobody's starting from 000 because almost everybody has been exposed to English. In Mexico, it's pretty common to start studying English as young as kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got a couple of things going on, right? It's more often than not, they're not being taught by a native English speaker, which in my opinion isn't bad because I teach Spanish and I'm not a native Spanish speaker, right? So a non-native speaker can have certain advantages if they know what they're doing. Oftentimes they don't know what they're doing, right? They're looking for an English teacher in a rural part of Mexico, so that would be like the equivalent of what Gunnison here in Colorado, like or Delta, like way out. And so
same thing in Japan. It's the same thing in Japan, but compulsory English education lasts for like 6 years in Japan. You know what? Those people come out of school, out of their 6 years of English, they really can't say more than 1 or 2 sentences.
There you go. Same story, right? So almost the exact same story. Another thing that happens is as most of us go through high school and college, right? We go through traditional grammar-based programs, and in my opinion, in my humble opinion, it's completely backwards the way that languages are taught, at least in this country, right? So I've been fascinated with what's called conversational Spanish and English. And I'm also fascinated with the way people learn their first language acquisition. And I have a 6-year-old son. So not only have I been studying these principles for a long time, I've been witnessing it. And I'm not just raising my son, I'm actively taking notes on what is going on during this process, right?
He's a case study.
Yeah. So the way people naturally learn their first language, right, is at home with their parents. They're exposed to pure conversation, right? What happens is in the first, the first month depending on the student, but let's just say the first 12 months of somebody's life, they don't have their vocal cords developed yet, so they can't actually start speaking the language, right? Mm-hmm. But they are developing their cognitive abilities and their listening comprehension, right? So naturally, the first step towards language acquisition is comprehension, right? So my son couldn't speak until he was about 6 months old, which is actually really young. It's definitely on the early side of things. But he started being able to understand us somewhere in between like the 3 to 6 month period, right? We started very early with an early childhood education program where they were teaching us baby sign language. So he couldn't talk, but he started learning signs, right? So like, this is the sign for milk and, you know, things like that. He was able to start communicating with us before he could start speaking, right? But he was able to first start understanding us, where, you know, we could give him, you know, they had us doing exercises where we'd give him a tennis ball and tell him to take it to the other side of the room. And he would crawl over to the other side of the room and turn around. And, you know, so that's developing listening comprehension. When he would, now, just because I'm a linguist and a Spanish student, right? When I would give him, you know, I know that the first things that people learn based off of survival skills, food, water, right? Food and water, bathroom, right? Those types of things, right? So my theory was I needed to get him using those words very quickly. And so when I would give him a bath, I would constantly splash the water and I would just say agua over and over and over again. And I did that for weeks. And sure enough, one day he repeated me. When he was about 6 months old, he said agua. And from that point on, he could tell us when he wanted water, right? And it was a Spanish word. I said it in Spanish. He started speaking Spanish before he spoke English.
That's amazing. It's 6 months. Wow.
Yeah. And then came mama, papa, then came leche, then came, you know, a variety of other words. And so the point is, first, listening comprehension. Second, production, speech, right? Now, kids start with words, and then they move on to phrases, and then they move on to exchanges, conversational exchanges, where you can ask them questions and they can answer, and vice versa, right? And that's all going on from 1 year to age 3, right? For the first 3 years of the student's life. What happens next? They start to learn how to read. So I got my son hooked on phonics.
Oh, yeah.
When he was about 3 years old. That program's amazing. He was reading in just a couple of weeks. He learned how to read just like that, right? So then he's learning how to read, right?
At what age was that?
About 3 years old.
3, okay.
Right? And then when he started going, I think, you know, in early childhood education, at about that same time, they started, you know, getting him to write the alphabet and, you know, teaching him how to write very things. But I wouldn't say he was really starting to write until he was about 4 or 5 years old, right? So he's in kindergarten right now. And now he's actually, sometimes he sits down and writes books. He actually writes full-on stories, and they're hilarious. And so, you know, he still doesn't know what grammar is. He still doesn't know what a, you know, sentence structure, a verb, a subject is, right? If you asked him what a verb conjugation was, he would have no idea what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Students start, from what I've seen and from what I've read, it's about 4th or 5th grade where students start getting introduced more to like structured grammar. So step 1, comprehension, listening comprehension. Step 2, verbal production. Step 3, conversational exchanges. Step 4, reading. Step 5, writing. Step 6 is grammar. By the time students start studying grammar, when they're about 9, maybe 10, let's call it 10 years old, just to pick a nice round number, they've essentially been speaking the language for 9 years. So if most kids start speaking at age 1, at age 10, they start studying grammar. They've been speaking for 9 years, right? Now look at the way languages are taught. What do we start with? Grammar. In my Spanish 1 class, we started with grammar. There was no conversation whatsoever. So in most teachers' approach to teaching is to start with grammar, and they typically teach, reading and writing at the same time, which is fine because, people already have a language system developed, so you don't have to, stagnate for very huge periods of time between these things, right? So people start with grammar, reading and writing, which is completely backwards. It's what they should end with. People should start with comprehension, listening comprehension, production, and conversational exchanges. It's natural, right? I'm reading this book right now called The Language Instinct, where this guy, Steven Pinker, argues that learning how to speak a language is a natural instinct, right? Kids are not taught how to speak a language. Their brains are pre-wired to get exposed to it and to do this process, which I just described, right? According to Steven Pinker, who's one of the leading linguists in the United States right now, it's a natural process, right? So nobody needs to be taught a language. That it's natural, it will fall in place. So these are the things that I've been fascinated with, and just in my own personal experiences of, learning how to speak Spanish was hard for me. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was a miserable experience. I just am about the most stubborn person you'll ever meet in your life. So I would not give up.
There you go.
Years later, the language school is born, right? So in 2011, I kind of got the idea for the language school, right? And so I'm going to share with you here, just so you can see kind of what I'm talking about. If you look up the language school online, you can find our little Google site here. And here are all of our reviews. I've got 127 reviews. And what do they say? Excellent school, very good teachers, excellent service, great instructors, small classes, enjoyed my experience very much. We've got a total of 4.9 stars out of 5 out of 127 reviews.
Yeah, I read through all the reviews that were in the PDF that you sent me, and there was nothing negative I could see.
It's not perfect, right? Here's somebody, she never even studied with us. I don't know who this person is, but she thinks whatever. It's not going to make everybody happy, but if you were to compare this, so let's say here we go over, and it's kind of unfair because you can't specifically compare it to the language school, but if we look at Community College of Aurora, which I would say is probably our biggest competitor, if you can talk about competitors.
Down the street from me. Yeah.
What's that?
It's right down the street from me, right down Airport Boulevard.
Yeah. So I'm not, why don't I see their Google reviews? Here we go. Look at that. What's their rating? 3.6 stars.
I'm not seeing that screen. You must have just clicked past it.
Are you not able to see the search results from Google here?
Yeah, but I'm not seeing. Oh, you're looking down by
Down
niche?
here. Yeah.
Facebook. Down by Facebook. Okay, 3.6. All right.
Right. So if we were, let's see, what's Google say about them? It's got to be in here. Yeah, 3.7 stars, right? It's not a direct comparison because that's not their language school per se, but we can only imagine, right? People love studying with my program. It's not the best program, everybody's different. There's all different types of language learners and just learning styles in the first place. So I would never, I don't like to think that it's the best program in the world, but what I can definitely say is it works if you're willing to put in the work to work the program, right? It really does work. It works phenomenally fast. So with that, let's go into, oh, we're still in desktop mode. Okay, great. So can you see this document that says how to start your own English as a second language program?
Yeah, that's part of the PDF. right?
Yeah. So that's the document that I think you have, right? So we can kind of skip through some of this stuff, right? And
Oh,
so step-by-step instructions for starting your own language business, right? This is probably the most important information for you at this particular point in time. So you've already done step 1, right? And you've already done step 2. Step 2 is to get the first level. You've actually gotten all the levels, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my Google Drive. And I'm going to share all the levels with you, Lance.
right.
If I can find them. Here we go. Products. All right, so you've essentially got the entire product base for my English lessons, okay? So I'm going to share that with you. Hyperglot, I like it.
That's it.
So what languages do you speak?
Let's see. So the 5 besides English would be Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Japanese, and Russian.
Wow, fantastic.
One of my degrees is in Russian. That's how I acquired it.
Nice.
Japanese was by living in Japan.
Cool.
Started with Spanish when I was 11 in 5th grade. So,
Fantastic, nice. So I've just shared with you. Now what you want to do is go in and accept that when we get off the phone today. You don't have to do it now when we get off Zoom, but go in, accept the invitation, and then start downloading the presentations to your computer.
the invitation is going to be an email then, you're saying?
Should be, yeah, should be, right? All right, so typically speaking, you're going to start with the very first level, right? And I've already got a new student. I think that I can, so I invited you to another class next Monday.
Yes.
So I think I'll have you start to work with her, if
Okay.
that makes sense. We can set that up as my observation of you to get you started on this program, right? Because the only way to really, I can't teach someone how to teach. You have to start teaching, right?
Sure.
So you'll be starting with this beginner English. And underneath this, we're going to look, so I've got actually different levels of beginner English, right? So I've got what I call English Foundations, English for High Beginners, and then English for High Beginners too. So we'll start with English Foundations. There's actually 4 levels of English Foundations. So within each one of these categories, we have multiple levels. And you can just see they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll start with number 1. And here's all the lessons, right?
That's one of my main questions at this point, David. What process do you use for assessing the student's level?
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that for sure, right? So you can kind of see here, there's these other teachers. I'm moving into the old category now.
Right.
The first thing that you really have to do is go into lesson number 1. And there's just a few slides that you'll need to kind of make your own, right? There's some introductory slides in here. So we'll go in here. Just so you can see what I'm talking about. When you go into lesson number 1, when you scroll down here, the only thing you really have to do is personalize slides number 5, 6, 7, and 8. Right, where you're sharing your contact information. You can share a little bit about your experience with traveling and learning languages and stuff, your professional experience, and things that you like to do. All right, so You want to customize lesson 1, slides 5 through 8 before you teach your first class. All right. Muy bien. So let's go back to the desktop here. All right. So have you read this section of our website yet?
Yes.
You have? Okay, perfect. So just to kind of walk you through it, right, just to make sure. This is just the welcome section that I send, you should be sending an email to your students with this information, right? Ooh, this is for Spanish Foundation, so I have to update this, right? But it's all the same information, right? This is just a little welcome message about the course, the highlights of the course, the grammar, free resources that are available. So like I use Quizlet for electronic flashcards, which is really cool because any of my students can just click on this link and then use the flashcards that are available. There is a web app that goes with the course, so students are free to use that. As you know, I record all of my classes and I put them on YouTube so students can watch previous lessons. And this is really cool. This is something that didn't exist before the pandemic. But so if you talk about turning lemons into lemonade, I started recording my classes. Now, if somebody misses a class, guess what? Bam, watch it on YouTube. You've got it, right? There's study tips for learning the language, 5 easy steps to speak the language with confidence, and then meetups, right? And all this stuff is free for the students to use.
The YouTube videos are private, right? I mean, that student has to have access to it.
It's open for everybody. It's public.
Oh, it's public. Okay.
Yep. Right. So that's part of my thing, right? Is I want everybody, because people don't believe that I can do what I can do, but I can really do it. So I just put it out there. There you go. You don't believe me? All the results are on YouTube for anybody to see. Now, this is the most important stuff, right? So your students should buy the book that goes with the level. And then this easy, all these resources, they can buy the presentations as they want to. That's not really necessary. I've got a book, 5 Easy Steps to Speak Spanish with Confidence. I have the same book for Spanish speaking learners learning English, by the way. And then this is my conversational book, right?
It's not an ebook. It's actually a hard copy.
They're all available as ebooks as well.
Okay.
Except for the textbook. The textbook is a hard copy because you have to do writing activities in it.
Okay.
Right. So this is the student workbook. All right. So make sure that you're very familiar with that, right? Let's see here. We're already on step number 4 so that we can do training. So this is the training. You've got essentially all the access you want for the next 3 months, right?
Okay.
So take advantage of it. Number 5, this is what we've been talking about. Where are you going to teach your students? Finally, students are starting to open up to the idea of online classes after 3 years of a pandemic, which is nice. You wouldn't believe what I've been through over these past 3 years.
I'm sure it's been terrible.
Right. Otherwise, I suggest getting started with in-person classes in your situation. You can start immediately by meeting at coffee shops if you have a one-on-one type situation. And I know you're investigating that kind of runway space. Did you do your tour yesterday?
I did. Yeah, it's a pretty impressive looking arrangement, actually. It's a really nice room. I mean, the room that I'd be using is, like he says, it's for up to 14 people. It's got this nice conference table, kind of an oval shaped conference table.
Perfect.
Like 10 chairs around the table. He's got a 55-inch television there, all the Wi-Fi connection that I want. The whiteboard if I decide I want to write something in front of them,
Nice. I think you're gonna like that. You're gonna do great with that type of place. So good. It occurred to me yesterday, and I don't know if this would be a possibility or whatever, but if you're considering doing evening classes,
I am. Yes.
After 5:30. Those types of places typically do business with people that are looking for meeting space during the day. So I would definitely swing that in your favor, that you're looking to rent it for off hours to see if they can offer you any extra discounts on it. So just
Yeah, okay, you're talking about a discount. I mean, this is 24/7 access. I can do this whenever I want.
nice.
So, yeah,
You're going to be really busy because 9 out of 10 people that call me are looking for evening classes, which I can't do. So you're going to be really busy, right?
I'm sorry, they're looking for what kind of classes?
Evening classes.
Evening, okay, evening, right.
Evening classes and weekends. I mean, you could just about run your entire business on Saturday and Sunday and not work the rest of the week.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Then you have to decide what your prices will be, right? So this is, I know, one of your questions. I do flexible pricing, right? And this is just something I started doing about a year ago, and it works really well, right? So I suggest students pay $25 to $50 per class for group classes and $50 to $100 per class for private lessons. But at the same time, I'm willing to accept, I will not accept lower than $10 per class for group classes. And for private lessons, I probably wouldn't accept lower than $30. But that's 100% up to you, right? I can tell you that this works pretty well. It's 100% up to you how you want to do prices.
And so, David, I mean, the question that occurs to me is, I mean, I just let the student literally tell me how much she wants to pay within that range?
Like I said, I would set it up like this. So I suggest between $25 to $50 per class. Is that okay with you? Could you do at least $25 per class or a little more? And then, yeah, they typically tell you what they can do. And sometimes I get students that are like, "Ooh, that's a lot of money. I can't afford that," you know? And so I say, what can you afford? You know, can you do at least 15, 20? Right?
So what's the motivation then, David, for anybody to ever tell me, oh yeah, I'll pay you $50, I'll pay you $100 for private lessons? Why would they do that?
People are doing it.
So literally you say, well, how much can you pay for your group? And he looks at you and says, well, I can do $50.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I explain, you know, that my job is to teach, and I don't want money to be the reason why people can't study. So, you know, if you're paying a little bit more, just know you're helping other people study, right? And I just do honor system, you know, it is what it is, right? I find that to work for me, you know. Ultimately, you'll have to figure out what works for you, but yeah, it works.
Then like, how does charging work as far as you take a certain amount of money up front, or?
Yeah, so my current structure is I'm doing classes Monday through Thursday. So for a student to get started, I would typically request that they pay for at least their first week in advance. But yeah, I always take upfront payments.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Take like, do you take only cash? You take credit cards, or?
so as a business, I try to get everybody to pay me through Zelle.
Zelle. Okay. Great.
Zelle is fantastic. It's really cool. So I use US Bank, and I get my students to pay me through Zelle, which they don't take any interest or anything like that. And it's an instant transfer. So the money hits your bank right away.
My Zelle is linked to my bank, correct?
Yeah. Next, I am set up with merchant services through my bank, so I can process credit cards.
Okay.
You know, if you do it through your bank, typically they'll do it a lot less.
Right.
And sometimes I take cash payments. So totally up to you. Give me 1 second, Lance. I'll be right back.
Sure.
All right. Any questions up until this point, Lance?
No, I guess the only thing that naturally occurs to me to really hit the ground running is assessment.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, I thought I had that in here somewhere. So let me show you the assessment. 9 out of 10 times, your students are going to start from the very first level.
Okay.
Right? For those that do speak a little bit of English already, I tell them that what we have to do is start with an evaluation. So do you see this document I have shared with you called the Conversational English Evaluation?
Yes, sir.
You got it?
Yep.
Yep, cool. All right, so this is just a little introduction to it. You can read through. But what this is, it's a conversational oral evaluation. So since I do conversation classes, if I want to be true to my assessment, I also have to do an oral evaluation, right? Because I have to test somebody's level of conversation, what they can actually speak. Now, over here on the right, I've got a ranking system in place, right? So I give people a 3 that are able to answer the question perfectly, grammatically correctly, 100% understandable, no errors at all, right? Now, oftentimes you'll have to tee this up and tell the students they have to answer you with a complete sentence, right? So like if I start with, how are you? It's very common for a student to respond good, right? But that's not a full sentence, right? So I have to, sometimes I have to coach them, right? Okay, ¿cómo se dice yo estoy bien? Esa es una oración completa, right? And then they would reply, I am good, okay?
Right.
So they would get a 3 for that, right? If they were to say something like, I good, they understood the question, but they did not even give me an acceptable, right? I good, you're missing the verb altogether. That's not acceptable at all. So they get an understandable, right? Okay, typically applies to more of these more complex questions, right? That, like, for example, here we've got a preposition. We've got the word from, right? And so I'll hear people often say, I am from to Mexico, right? Or I am from for Mexico, or I am, you know, they might say something wrong with the preposition, but they got the verb, you know, I am, right? So I might give them a 2 for that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
And you can kind of see over here on the left, we've got the levels that correspond with each of the questions. And that goes all the way through our advanced level, right? So it's pretty simple. You just track up the scores, add it up, and then look down here at the scoring guide. And so if somebody got a 28, then they could start with level 2, right? If somebody got a 27, they've got to start with the first lesson,
right?
With level 1, right? And I'll even give you a secret here, Lance. Unless somebody can really get all the way up to high beginner 1, so even if somebody gets like a 70, I might still encourage you to start from level 1 or level 2, right? You know, if you can, and this is just the more I learned, that the easier you make it for your students, the more you're going to boost their confidence, right? So somebody, I might advise you, whatever the score you get here, subtract 1 level.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Because when people are learning a language, you know, their motivation is going to be huge. All of your students are pretty much going to be highly motivated, so you don't have to worry about that too much. But you need to work really hard in building up their confidence, in reducing their anxiety. So technically speaking, you got a 28, you're ready for level 2, it might be hard, right?
Sure.
And if you start with a level that's too hard, it increases their anxiety and it reduces their self-confidence. Whereas you start with a level 1 and everything's easy for them and they feel like, oh my God, this is easy. And guess what? Their confidence goes off the charts and their anxiety goes down next to nothing, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's how you assess people. It works really, really well. It's pretty accurate, you know, nothing is perfect. And so that's why, perhaps more to answer your question, when I'm doing customer service, when people are calling and they're asking me about classes and stuff like that, what I lead with is an introductory class, which they have to pay for. I just changed the price from $20 to $30 for the introductory class, and people are more than happy to pay it. Now I set it up like this. Hey, we have to get started. We have to first do an evaluation to figure out what level you're going to start with. And then I like to do a class to also confirm that it's the right level. You know, tests are kind of funny, right? Because depending on how people feel at that particular point in time, that's going to influence their test results a little bit, depending on the questions you're asking and what their exposure has been. So sometimes I get started with a class. So then, you know, you test it into level 4. Okay, let's get started with level 4.
David, I'm sorry, are we saying then that there's an introductory lesson that is separate from the beginning foundation lesson?
Well, let's not confuse two things, right? So perhaps, maybe or maybe not, okay? So almost everybody that I start with, this is the way I say it, right? First, we have to determine your current level. So to do that, I like to do an evaluation, and then I like to give you a class based off of that evaluation to make sure that it's the right fit.
That's what I thought you were talking about.
Okay. If they tell you, I don't speak any English, I want to start from 0, then you don't have to do that, right? You start from the very first lesson. The evaluation is for people that tell you that they've had experience with English, that they know a little bit of English, right? And so in that situation, if they score into level 4, right, then you go in to give them a class based off of level 4 to make sure that they're up for it. Because sometimes I go into a class with a student and we find out that it's too hard, right? Oh. Despite the fact that they tested well, when we get into the class, it's too hard. And vice versa. I've also gotten into classes with people where it turns out to be too easy. You know, you can quickly, for whatever reason, on the exam, on the evaluation, they were a little nervous. Uh-huh. And so they weren't doing well, but once they get into class, they start to loosen up and have fun with it. And you start to see, oh, they're actually in a higher level.
Right.
Does that answer your questions about how to evaluate students?
Yeah, I kind of thought that was where you were going with the introductory class. And that's just a single class, right? It's just one session, the introductory. Mm-hmm. Don't need more than one session. Right?
Yeah. And then I finish with a study plan, right? So, okay, good. How'd you like the class today? And this is conversation, so I just wanted to make sure it was a good fit for you, for your level. Next, let's create a study plan. You know, do you want to study private classes or group classes? Do you want to study every day? Do you want to study once a week? You create that study plan together with them.
Okay, so literally you have students who meet with you every day, 4 days a week. Then you have some just do 1 day a week.
For the most part, Lance, I've shifted over to doing intensive classes. Oh. Almost all of my students meet with me every day. Oh. If we go in here to my calendar, just so you can take a look. For my English classes, this is what it currently looks like. So I've got a class Monday through Thursday in the morning. This is the intensive class. And then I've got another one in the afternoon, Monday through Thursday. It's intensive. Now, next week, this is the student that I mentioned to you, and I invited you here. So there you are on the invitation, Lance. Patricia, I just gave her the introductory class yesterday.
Okay.
She's starting from the very first level. Because of my schedule, I'm unable to give her classes every day.
Okay.
This is literally the only availability that I had that worked with her schedule. So we're starting off once a week. Ultimately, this is why I think this is a great student for you to start working with, because it's really good to get in with a private lesson with a student to get comfortable with the program first. You know, it's much easier to start with one student than 10 students at a time. So we can kind of tag team this student together for the first month or so, and then hopefully you'll be ready and feeling up to it, and I can turn her 100% over to you.
So David, are you saying that you said based upon your constraints, I guess currently, that you're not actually teaching the very beginning level right now? So she wasn't able to go into that?
Yeah, I don't have a group option at this particular point in time.
Okay.
And I don't, you know, this is my schedule, right? I am full all day, every day. So I don't even have the ability really to launch a new class at this point.
Okay.
This is why I'm so excited to have you on board, Lance.
I guess I fill that gap, don't I? Kind of.
You like, you're going to be busy really fast. It should only take you a couple of months to be 100% maxed out.
Okay. Right.
I'm thinking, right? Like, and you know, I'm gonna be introducing you to all these people that I can't work with. Guess who they get to work with?
All right.
You're the only person that signed up for the program so far. So
The only one?
so far, yeah.
Wow. And I was convinced that after that first webinar that I wasn't able to attend, I figured your 3 slots were just filled.
It's a smoking deal.
Well, no kidding.
It's a smoking deal. there's no other business you can start for $1,000.
Well, that's why I had to jump on it once you told me that it was still available.
Yeah, and I'm only doing that for the first 3 people, right? Like, this is what you got is easily worth a lot more money than that.
I get it.
All right, let's go back to the desktop. So now you've got really good news, right? So far, you're the only ESL instructor I'm working with in the Denver area, which means you're going to get almost all of your students directly from me. Now, I would suggest that you do these things as soon as possible, right? Start advertising. And for now, do what's free. Don't spend the money on advertising yet until you get kind of the hang of it, right? It's free to create a Facebook page, right? So whatever you want to call yourself, Lance El Profe, I call myself David El Profe, right? So think about whatever, you know, this is where you have to think, do you want to start an official school or do you want to just be the guy, right? So
David, I mean, it occurs to me, as you've just said, okay, most of my students are going to be coming directly from you. Then, I mean, is there a lot of word of mouth that happens where they're going to tell friends, family, neighbors, that sort of thing? Oh, call Lance?
Once you get that reputation going, yeah.
Okay.
Right. I get a lot of referrals.
So I'm wondering, to what extent I need to worry about, distributing flyers and that sort of thing.
You know, you're lucky because you're the first person to sign into this program. So your marketing efforts arguably could be minimal.
Okay.
However, all of this stuff takes a long time to really start working in your favor.
Yeah.
Which is why I suggest you go ahead and do it.
Right.
Set up a Facebook page. Really, the most important thing I would say is to set up a Google business page, right? That's when we looked at our results earlier, like when I was showing you this, the reviews.
Yeah, right.
This is because I have a Google business page set up. Oh. It's free, right? So it's free to set up a Facebook page and it's free to set up a Google business page.
Oh, I figured Google charged for the business page. Okay.
It's all free, right?
All right.
And then, yeah, I would say to start when I first started teaching like privately back in 2007 after I graduated from college. I just went around to coffee shops and rec centers and grocery stores, and I would post a flyer up, right?
Okay.
And I got a ton of business just from doing that. So it's always a good place to start.
All right.
All right.
All right.
Now, step number 8 is to sign up your first student, right? And we can do some of that together until you get comfortable with it. We can schedule a time where we make phone calls together, so I can show you how that's done.
Great.
But once you get somebody signed up, you've agreed on dates and times and locations and prices, you'll want to send them a version of this email so that they know this is just for level 1. So this has the book. This has the link to all the books that they want to buy, and it also has the link to the presentations if they want to buy that, right?
Right.
Now, step number 9, start teaching. In my experience, it takes teachers about 3 times of going through a level from start to finish before they really get the hang of it, right? So keep that in mind, right? Your first class is not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Nobody knows how to teach until they start teaching, right? So it'll just take you a little time to get used to it. The good news is I'm going to be with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
And then after that, essentially you repeat with all the other levels of the class, right? After you do level 1, you go to level 2. After you do level 2, you go to level 3.
Well, it looks to me like, because you've sent me the links to all of the presentations, it kind of looks like it literally is in a box.
It's a language school in a box. That's what
Yeah.
I'm calling it. Yeah.
That's how it looks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
What questions do you have for me right now?
Boy, let's see. I'm not really sure that I have many, David. I think you covered, I've posed the questions that have occurred to me as I've gone through the material that I have thus far.
Okay.
It was mainly, assessment. I didn't really know how the assessment was going to be done. I didn't know how, pricing would be done, that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
now you've explained all of that. I don't think I have much more to ask you.
Yeah. And I do all this stuff based off of what works for me. Ultimately you've got to figure out what works for you.
Right.
But I've been doing this full time since 2011. 2011 is when I used to do a corporate sales and marketing job selling software. And I quit that job in 2011. I got an inheritance check from my grandfather that passed that year at the same time for $5,000. I started this business with $5,000.
Wow.
Thank you, Grandpa.
Thanks, Grandpa. That's great.
Yep. And so I've been doing this full time since 2011. Before the pandemic changed everything. Before that, we were strong. We had over 300 students. I had 15 teachers working for me.
Yeah.
We developed this curriculum from scratch, right? We didn't have any of this stuff. I started using my old college textbooks, and every time that I would do an activity that I felt like didn't work right, I rethought about it, how I could do it better. And so this is truly, 11 years, 12 years worth of, just like learning a new language, trying.
Yeah.
Trying and making it better, right? I've had, dozens of other teachers come through and use this program. I designed this when I started my school. There are a couple of things that I've never liked about education. One is that teachers are expected to work these insane hours and do all this class preparation work and grading and stuff like that during non-paid hours, right? So if you do a survey of 10 teachers in the Denver area, most of them will tell you they go into school around 8, they teach their classes, full day of classes, they go home, they relax for a little bit, and then they start lesson planning and grading homework for the next day. And they spend 3 to 4 hours doing that.
Yep.
I've never been okay with that. So I've never believed in non-paid work time. So obviously starting a school where I was going to have to hire people and train people, I wanted to do everything that would minimize that, right?
Right.
So that's why I created these PowerPoint presentations. There's no need to recreate the wheel every time, right? Like if you look at what McDonald's does, if you eat a McDonald's hamburger here in Denver or in New York or in California, it is the exact same hamburger. There is zero difference between that hamburger, right? And so that's kind of like what I wanted to do with the language school. There's no need for every teacher to teach Spanish to spend hours to create lesson plans, because I still, to this day, I don't understand why that's the way it's done, but that's the way it's done.
Well, I guess if teachers were paid, if they were compensated for all of that extra time, and if they were well enough paid to begin with, I guess it might not be so bad, but they're not.
They're not. So I wanted to change things, you know. I really wanted to kind of do things differently.
Great.
Now I'm into this point where I want to train other teachers how to do this. There's a need for this. The need for this in Denver alone is huge. I don't see why by the end of this thing, I'm not going to have 50 or 100 teachers. If I used to have 15 teachers just in Northeast Denver alone, imagine the possibilities.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've had students come from Fort Collins in Colorado Springs to work with me. I've had students wait 3 years to work with me. I worked with Jamie last year. She had tried to get into the language school for 3 years. She could never get in because we were always full. We limited classes to 8 students, and she came back every 3 to 6 months trying to get into a class she could, and we never had availability for her.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I want other teachers to have what I have, right? And I want other students to have the opportunity to have what my students have. And right now I'm just limited because of my family situation and stuff like that. And so I spent a lot of time pondering over this last year, and I decided that this is the way to do it, right? Sell my program to other teachers and then teach them how to use it so that we can get more students speaking English here in the Denver area.
Terrific.
Cool. Are you going to come later to the 1:30 class at my house?
That was my plan.
Cool. I'll see you then.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Take care.
David. Bye.